Hello, thank you so much for joining me for the presentation of the Office of the Flood Insurance Advocate. I want to start off, my name is Rhonda Montgomery. I am the Deputy Flood Insurance Advocate at FEMA, the Federal Insurance and Mitigation Administration. And the Office of the Flood Insurance Advocate is an office within FEMA that advocates for the fair treatment of policyholders and property owners related to the National Flood Insurance Program. Today, I'd like to discuss the 2018 annual report, the progress report. I'll get into more details of that later, but then I also generally would like to talk about the office operations. So first of all, the Office of the Flood Insurance Advocate, the OFIA, advocates for the fair treatment of policyholders and property owners by providing education and guidance on all aspects of the National Flood Insurance Program. We really like to say that we are there to help the frustrated and confused policyholders and property owners that are affected by the NFIP. I do want to highlight that our office is an office of 12 staff, and we have staff that are subject matter experts on all aspects of the National Flood Insurance Program. So we have expertise in our office on the mapping program, on insurance underwriting, on the NFIP claims process, on floodplain management, as well as the grants program. So we really do pride ourselves on being experts related to the National Flood Insurance Program. Backing up just a little bit, I do want to highlight the origins of the Office of the Flood Insurance Advocate. So Congress called for FEMA to stand up an advocate as part of the 2014 Homeowner Flood Insurance Affordability Act. So in that act, Congress called on FEMA to stand up an advocate to advocate for the fair treatment of policyholders and property owners. So that's kind of why we're here. So essentially, when we look at the services we provide, they kind of fall in three buckets. Number one, we provide assistance to individual policyholders and property owners, especially on those most complex of cases. As we talk through the slides today, you'll also see that there are a number of other resources that are available to policyholders and property owners to help answer those questions as well. So the cases that come into our office really are those most complex cases, or those situations, and especially as a local floodplain administrator, I believe you often see where you see that homeowner, that policyholder or property owner is starting to get caught in a loop. You know, whether it's a loop of you should call your insurance agent and the insurance agent says call FEMA, you know, and the person starts to feel like they are not getting the kind of information that helps them understand their situation. Those are the kind of cases that come to the OFIA. Just as an aside, it's also important to know that folks come to the OFIA, and the OFIA utilizes what we call a customer relationship management tool. So think of this kind of as that, you know, your Amazon account almost, if you will. So this is a situation where through our CRM tool, we're able to capture the data about that policyholder or property owner's concerns and the reason that they came into our office. And what that CRM tool does, or that data analytics does for us, is it helps us with that next item that you see on the screen, which is identifying trends and issues that appear to be impacting a broad range of FEMA customers. So in this situation, we really have an opportunity to drive the work that we do based off of data. And we find that's very, very important in the advocate's office, because really this isn't, the recommendations that we make to FEMA leadership isn't about what our perspective is as far as, you know, kind of staff or my opinion. Rather, our recommendations are driven by the data, and the data comes from our casework. And so finally, that third point there is that we make recommendations to FEMA and FEMA leadership that are intended to address those larger issues faced by customers, and that really speak towards programmatic improvements. We like to think, and we expect that if we have, for instance, 10 customers that come to us about a similar theme, and that we can make a recommendation to ease that frustration or that confusion, that may impact, and frankly, we truly believe it will impact a larger audience, right? So that audience that maybe hasn't come to the OFIA, but still experiences this frustration or this confusion. So down at the bottom of the slide, you'll see that our landing page is at that www.fema.gov/flood insurance advocate. We also let people know that they can easily find us through kind of those common internet search engines by just searching FEMA Flood Insurance Advocate or Flood Insurance Advocate. And essentially coming to that web page, not only will a customer find great resources, especially if they're kind of trying to self-educate themselves on the various topic that they're looking for, but also at the bottom of that web page is a link to Ask the Advocate, and that launches the customer into that web portal, which then allows them to ask their question of the flood insurance advocate. So in addition, let me advance to the next slide here. So as I mentioned, there are a number of resources that are available to the policyholder in addition to the flood insurance advocate. So what folks may not realize is that their insurance agent is a wealth of information to help them understand their flood insurance policy, their coverage, and at the time of claim, perhaps that insurance agent can help them navigate the claims process, or the insurance company can help them navigate the claims process. And then there's the local community official and then state officials. And of course, everyone knows that every state has a state NFIP coordinating office. That office is there to assist folks in the state related to questions that they might have about the flood insurance program and floodplain management in their state. But the local official really is a great resource, especially around permitting for floodplain management purposes, and even understanding a little bit about, say, the community status and the community rating system, things like that. And then, of course, there's the Flood Map Service Center, and this is really about a resource for policyholders, property owners, homeowners that have questions about the flood insurance rate map, or let's say the letter of map amendment process, or things like that. They can go to the FEMA Flood Map Service Center to seek those answers, and it's a great resource. And then, of course, there's the NFIP Help Center. And this is more of just a kind of a general call center related to your flood insurance policy. So if you have general questions about your flood insurance policy, the NFIP Help Center is a great resource for that. And then if you are into kind of self-educating about your situation and just want to learn some of the nuances about the program, floodsmart.gov is an excellent resource for that. And then finally, there are the FEMA regional offices. Of course, there are 10 regional offices across the US, and the regional offices have, of course, expertise in the National Flood Insurance Program. So they have mapping specialists, they have a regional flood insurance liaison, they have grants expertise, as well as floodplain management expertise. And then the flood map information exchange is a resource that you can speak to an expert about mapping, or there's also a live chat service for folks that would just prefer to chat about their question. So that's another resource for you. So moving forward is related to OFIA's inquiry management process. So kind of how it works behind the scenes when we get an inquiry. So as I mentioned a couple slides back, you can go to the landing page, the Flood Insurance Advocates landing page, click on Ask the Advocate, and then this really walks you through how it works. So an inquiry is submitted to our office from lots of folks. You can see policyholders and property owners. Sometimes the regions escalate a case to us where they see that a customer is caught in that due loop. We receive inquiries through FEMA's Congressional Affairs Office and through some industry contacts. So for instance, if an insurance agent recommends that their policyholder come to the Flood Insurance Advocates Office, that we may get an inquiry that way. So then once the inquiry is submitted to our office, then we assign that to a subject matter expert, a caseworker, and that caseworker really gathers all of the relevant information. We coordinate with the region when a case comes in, the region where that case originated is notified to let the region know that they have someone from their region has contacted the advocate's office, and the initial inquiry is shared with the region. Our advocate representative also researches the FEMA's databases for an understanding of their flood insurance policy and any past losses that they may have experienced. And then we really circle in on what that inquiry is about. Moving forward, if we need to, we will engage the relevant program office. We work with experts all across FEMA and FEMA to come to a resolution, and we help find a resolution to that inquiry. Then finally, of course, we notify the property owner or the policyholder about that resolution and help them understand what the next course of action is. So with that, I'd like to highlight a few things. Again, as I mentioned, we really do rely on data analytics. I think it's important to acknowledge that about 70, I would say between 75 and 78% of the cases that come into our office, we actually are able to validate the answer that policyholder previously received. So for instance, they may have called their insurance agent and they may just be coming to the advocate's office to validate that answer, or they may have gone to the local community official, and again, they're coming to the advocate's office to validate that answer. So we do capture data on when that policyholder has received good information. So we find that promising, right? We find that exciting that they are getting accurate information. I will say that the one benefit that someone has when they come to our office, because customer service is what we do, right? And it's what we have to worry about, is we really do take the time to explain to the policyholder how it is that we arrived at the answer that we arrived at. And so for instance, if a customer is questioning, say their flood insurance policy is $5,000 and they're very concerned about that, we may validate that, but we'll also go into some of the details about what that means for the customer. Are there opportunities that the policyholder can reduce their premium by making modifications to their structure, things like that? So I think that that's important to recognize as well. So then A few other things that we pride ourselves on is responsiveness. So the one thing that is super important to the flood insurance advocate, David Starrett is the flood insurance advocate, is responsiveness. When a customer comes to our office, we want our staff to respond to them. So we actually have performance goals that the staff have to meet. Again, our CRM tool allows us to track this, but we want a customer that comes to the advocate's office to hear from the OFIA within a day of receiving their inquiry. We don't want someone to say, I went to that office, but I never got anything. We don't want, we want to make sure that folks are being responded to. And we also, again, are very customer service centric. Again, this is what we do, right? We provide customer service. So we have the bandwidth to really see an issue from start to finish and really walk that policyholder or property owner through the situation and really give that personal attention that inquiry deserves. And again, as I said at the beginning, sometimes these are very complex cases and it takes a little while to explain it. And then finally, as I also mentioned, is that we are experts in the flood insurance program, right? So we make sure that we have the subject matter expertise. And I will also say that we do consider if a policyholder's answer is consistent with statute and regulations, that we absolutely consider that they have been treated fairly. Now, if there's an opportunity and our casework indicate that there's something within statute or regulation that's creating unfairness, then we can look at it that way, but certainly on an individual case-by-case basis. If the statute and the regulation is being applied consistently to that policyholder, property owner, or homeowner, we do believe that that is being treated fairly. Okay? So then let's jump into the OFIA annual report. So as I mentioned, the OFIA uses its casework to analyze data and information on inquiries that come into our office. So we analyze the previous year's inquiries, and we really look at those kind of 5 to 7 or 8 of the most frustrating or confusing topics. So these things that really bubble up for policyholders and property owners. And we include those in an annual report that we send to FEMA and FIMA leadership. And within that annual report, we make recommendations to reduce confusion and frustration about a certain topic of the program. So of course, the annual report is published each calendar year. And we do make the annual report available to Congress and and welcome a briefing with Congress if they so request. So regarding the OFIA 2018 annual report, we identified 4 topics in the 2018 annual report that were creating frustration, confusion, and really warranted that systemic solution that was needed to reduce those frustration. And I'll get into the specifics of each of these, but it's confusion regarding premium increases, confusion regarding condominium coverage, claims impact when assuming a non-primary residence, and then finally lack of refunds for prior policy terms after a LOMA was issued. So regarding the confusion around premium increases, so as many of you know, as part of both the 2012 legislation, the Bigger Waters legislation, and then the 2014 Homeowner Flood Insurance Affordability Act, there were caps put in for policy increases. And what has happened is that so the program office considers a misrating they consider a misrating to be contained in the flood insurance manual. And so a misrating is excluded in that premium increase cap. And so what we recommend is that the program relook at that and also kind of develop a mechanism to transition that property owner from one rate class to another when there is a misrating, while remaining within the maximum amount of premium chargeable under the law. So essentially, the confusion we've gotten is that policyholders come to our office where perhaps they've experienced a 500% increase in their premium because of a misrating. And so they're confused because they don't understand the difference between a misrating and just premium increases. So we have appreciated that that's it has created a lot of confusion. So the next topic is around condominium coverage. So in this case, oftentimes condominium owners don't realize that their condominium association may have purchased flood insurance coverage for the structure of that condominium, right? So that condominium association has structural coverage for the condominium, and that the property owner or that unit owner really only has to purchase contents coverage. So they get a little bit confused when they go to those unit owners, when they go to their insurance agent and they say, I want to buy a flood insurance policy, because that insurance agent may not realize that the condo association already has a form of flood insurance. And so there's confusion because that unit owner just doesn't know what to buy. And sometimes the insurance agent doesn't realize that there's already coverage on the structure. So we just recommend that new material is created for for that residential condominium unit owner. So there's educational materials for condo associations, but we really think that the unit owner needs information that's directed towards them. And then of course we recommend that there be a disclosure form developed and signed by the owners of the condo units at the time of application for flood insurance coverage, and make sure that that's available to insurance agents. And then, of course, looking at pricing the dwelling policies a little bit different if there's already coverage by the residential condominium building association policy. So that really helps avoid that kind of duplication of insurance coverage. And then the next topic is around claims, but this is claims related to the property being designated non-primary. So this gets into the weeds a little bit, but if you'll bear with me, essentially, as you all know, the NFIP was instructed to charge a $250 surcharge for non-primary residences for flood insurance policies. Well, oftentimes residency, so you'll see in the recommendation, is that residency status was typically a follow-on request after a customer applied for a flood insurance policy. And admittedly, there were a number of situations where the policyholder didn't realize that they needed to produce secondary documentation to prove that it was a primary residence. So what would happen is that the insurer would request documentation to prove it was a primary residence. the policyholder would not produce that documentation, either because they didn't realize it was needed or they forgot, whatever reason. And so what would happen is that there would be a $250 surcharge applied to that policy. So instead of going back to the homeowner and asking for that additional, and remember, a policyholder already pays a $25 surcharge for $50 surcharge for a primary residence. So the insurer, so the insurance company would have to go either request the additional money for the surcharge, or they would reduce the coverage for that policy to cover the cost of the surcharge. And what was happening was customers were not discovering this until they made a claim where they thought, let's say hypothetically, they purchased $100,000 of flood insurance coverage, but because there was additional money taken out of the premium to pay the surcharge, their coverage was reduced by that amount. And so now, for instance, let's say they only have $75,000 worth of coverage. And these are just hypothetical numbers, but it illustrates the importance that residents or homeowners in primary residences didn't realize this to be the situation. So we've made a recommendation that that first, the burden of producing the documentation to demonstrate primary residence be reduced. And so you'll note right there that that FEMA is instructing NFIP insurers to validate the residency status, so to validate the residency status at the time that the flood insurance permit application is received, so that there isn't confusion at the time of the claim status. So then finally, the fourth recommendation is a lack of prior term refunds after a letter of MAP amendment is issued. And this is just a situation where a policyholder is paying for a flood insurance premium where there is where they are charged as if they're in the special flood hazard area, but they produce documentation that demonstrates that their property was not in the special flood hazard area, nor was it ever. And so through the LOMA process, they are removed from the special flood hazard area, and their flood insurance premium, let's say if they converted to a PRP, would be reduced, or at least the mandatory requirement to purchase flood insurance is removed from that property. So what has happened is that policyholder was only eligible for a 1 year prior term refund. And so we are recommending that FEMA reconsider that and actually go back and allow that policyholder 5 years of premium refund, or back to the effective date of the flood insurance rate map, whichever is later. And then we also recommend that educational materials be updated to explain prior term refunds to policyholders and property owners, so that there is a reduction, that confusion is reduced. So I also would like to highlight a report that we wrote in 2019, where we took a look at past recommendations that we made to the program offices and just analyzed how those recommendations were addressed by the program offices, and then looked at kind of what implementing those recommendations did to the OFIA casework. So I'm really excited to kind of share this with you, was that the program office, so what we did was we looked at the 2015 annual report and the 2016 annual report. And essentially we acknowledged that there really wasn't, we decided not to look at the 2017 annual report because it just didn't give the program office enough time to make those recommendations that we recommended in 2017. So in a couple of years, we'll do another kind of progress report that will pick up that 2017 recommendation. But in 2015 and 2016, the OFIA made 14 recommendations over those two report years. And I'm thrilled to say that 45% of those recommendations have been fully implemented. And what's fascinating about that is that we can directly look at the OFIA casework and validate that there has been a reduction in that frustration and confusion of policyholders because we're seeing a reduction in our casework related to those topics. So there's a 75 to 85% reduction in related casework to those those recommendations that have been fully implemented. So we're really thrilled about that. So more generally, kind of that progress report really demonstrated to us that we are reducing frustration and contributing to a positive customer experience based on the amount of premium refunds that are available to policyholders and property owners. There's lower premiums because we've helped to validate flood insurance premiums, and when a customer has access to a lower premium, that they're made aware of that and given that lower premium. Of course, we have a number of educated customers, and there's an increase in NFIP resources that allow premium savings, even if that means, say, modifying your structure to mitigate against losses that then result in premium savings. So some of the ways that we did that, right, was the policyholder receiving a notification indicating that they were eligible for a low cost premium, such as the preferred risk policy or the newly mapped rating procedure. So instead of being rated as a standard zone X, they actually qualify for a premium preferred risk policy, and they are now made aware of that. And then there's also the property owners that remain eligible for premium discounts using the newly mapped procedure for up to an additional year after a map change. And oftentimes, and it is confusing, but flood insurance agents didn't realize that, so they didn't make that premium available to them. So we're able to educate the homeowner as well as the agent to let them know that that premium is available. So kind of finally, almost back to where we started, is the resources. So there's lots of resources out there for the policyholder and the property owner. So there's general NFIP resources that really, I like to consider this, the person that's just trying to educate themselves and looking to see what's available on the website. So both the National Flood Insurance Program website as well as floodsmart.gov are great resources for that. There's, of course, again, your insurance agent or insurance company, state and local officials. I spent a lot of time on this earlier. There's the NFIP Help Center, the regional offices, and finally, the Office of the Flood Insurance Advocate. So I want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this conversation, and certainly want you to know that FEMA's Office of the Flood Insurance Advocate is a resource that's available to the policyholders and property owners that are in your community that you see need a little bit of extra help and need that hand holding. So now you have access to all of those NFIP resources, as well as the link to the Flood Insurance Advocate's Office. So thank you again for all of the hard work you do, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to today's conversation. Have a great day.